Well, Christmas Island remains on edge following a week of riots and mass breakouts from the island's main detention centre. The unrest has been blamed on severe overcrowding and the long delays in processing asylum claims. The Immigration Department is now trying to ease the pressure by transferring several hundred detainees to the mainland. But still, the boats keep coming. The two most recent vessels to arrive in Australian waters were intercepted yesterday and on the weekend near Ashmore Reef, and those on board have been taken straight to the mainland, bypassing Christmas Island altogether. Chris Bowen is the Minister for Immigration. He's in our Parliament House studio. Minister, welcome to breakfast.
Thanks, Ray. Good morning.
Your department has been moving detainees off the island. That started. How many hundreds of people will be transferred to the mainland this week?
Well, Fran, we have a regular process of moving people off Christmas Island to the mainland. Of course, we've expedited that in relation to the recent events, and we'll continue to have charters off the island this week.
How many?
There'll be a considerable number, and we need to get the numbers back down to closer to the capacity of Christmas Island. That's been something we've been working on for some time, as you know. I've announced several new detention centres on the mainland. I didn't do that for fun. Didn't do that because I thought it would make me more popular in those local communities. I did that to relieve the pressure on Christmas Island. And we do need to continue to reduce the numbers on Christmas Island, and we will.
So capacity at Christmas Island is 800. There's something like 2,400 people there now. Are you heading for 800? Is that the optimal number?
No, 800 was the original capacity of the Northwest Point detention facility. There is a surge capacity, and there are other facilities on Christmas Island as well.
So what's the optimal number for Christmas Island?
Well, much closer to the 2,000 figure. We had 3,000 people on Christmas Island last December. I wanted to bring that figure down. Before last week's events, we had 2,500. We do need to bring that figure down.
As of yesterday, there were still, I think, 20 detainees on the loose on Christmas Island. Are there still asylum seekers unaccounted for? Can you confirm that?
No, my advice is that all asylum seekers have been accounted for within the Northwest Point Detention Centre.
So that head count has been done, and that's all finalised.
That's correct.
Yesterday on breakfast, we spoke with local businessman Paul Maberley. He told us that residents had been warning the government for months that the numbers were unsustainable. Let's have a listen.
It's exacerbated by the fact that several residents have been trying to give advice on some of the issues that have come to pass. And there's one resident who wrote a 3-page letter last December, pretty well prophesying what would happen if the overcrowding were to continue.
So the locals could see it coming, others could see it coming. Why were these warnings ignored?
Well, I don't think it's right to say that warnings were ignored, Fran. As I say, we were moving and have been moving to reduce numbers on Christmas Island and have reduced them. Now, there's some reports in the paper this morning, for example, about AFP reviews. That one AFP review made 9 recommendations about how to improve security. Considering the numbers on Christmas Island, I'm advised that all 9 recommendations were adopted and enacted. That report, for example, talked about having 2,300 people in the Northwest Point Detention Centre. At the time of the riots last week, we had 1,800, so less than that report was predicting might be the case. So, I think Christmas Island residents have legitimate issues to raise.
You can't claim that the Northwest Point Centre, is that what it's called, isn't overcrowded. It was built, the surge capacity for that centre was supposed to be 800.
But I'm making the point, Fran, that measures were put in place to deal with increased numbers. Now, I understand the views
measures were put in place, but were these measures appropriate? I mean, it's hard to deny this whole crisis has been prompted by the overcrowding and the delays in processing, because figures from your own department show the average time spent in detention in the past year, 214 days, which is almost trebled in the past year.
Well, Fran, there's a couple of issues within that point you've made, so let me deal with each of them. Firstly, on the issue of overcrowding and my department's preparedness, etc., on the Monday, which was very early last week, I announced that I would appoint an independent review. I think that's very important to review all the actions of my department, of Serco, and preparedness in terms of preparedness, warnings and response. And that review will be conducted by 2 very eminent former public servants, Dr. Alan Hawke and Helen Williams, and they will get to the bottom of all those issues. So that's an important part of our transparent approach. On the issue of processing times and overcrowding, look, Fran, I think it's very easy to generalise here. Yes, we do need to process people more quickly. And yes, longer processing times do lead to frustrations. That's why, apart from other reasons, I've introduced a new processing regime which came into force on the 1st of March, hired more reviewers, and have been working very assiduously with AGO and the Attorney-General to make sure that we have that security clearance working much more efficiently, and I think we're about to see that bear significant fruit, and we've been working on that for some months. But I make this point more generally, Fran. Some people are concerned about that. Other people are concerned because their claims for asylum have been rejected. And you might recall last year I warned about this and said, as we're going to see increasing rejection rates of refugee claims, we're going to see more unrest in detention centres because people will not like the results they're going to get. Now, Fran, what you can't do is let that influence your decision. We have a rigorous process of assessing whether people are refugees or not. If people are refugees, they're accepted. If they're not, then they're told that we don't regard you as a genuine refugee. They have rights of appeal, but it leads to frustrations.
Can you tell us whether those involved in the riots are those who've had their refugee status refused?
I think you'll find, Fran, that there's a variety of cases. I mean, we had around 200 people protesting. They all had a variety of cases. Some had been accepted as refugees, some had been rejected.
And doesn't that go to the point? I mean, we're now talking about suggestions that some of those involved may not be granted a visa. The opposition's demanding that be the case. Why would that be fair when this whole thing, these detentions are entirely predictable due to the overcrowding and the delays?
Fran, nothing justifies violent behaviour of the sort we saw last week. Nothing justifies that. Now, I have said there are a number of tests to apply, the character test.
But is it the character of the individuals that caused the riots or the overcrowding and the delays?
Well, Fran, I don't think you can blame anybody for people behaving violently other than those who behaved violently. It was unacceptable behaviour. It was not just behaviour directed towards the Department of Immigration and Serco and the Australian Federal Police. It was directed towards other detainees. The vast majority of asylum seekers on Christmas Island said, we want nothing to do with this protest. We think this is completely inappropriate. We recognise the government is taking the steps they're taking, and they disassociated themselves from that protest. If a relatively small group chooses to engage in violent protest action, that is unacceptable.
It's 12 minutes to 8 on Radio National Breakfast. Our guest this morning is Immigration Minister Chris Bowen. Minister, the last two boats to be picked up were intercepted near Ashmore Reef. They've been taken straight to the mainland. We heard you on AM saying that they'll still be treated within the offshore, the limited legal regime of offshore processing. But I'm wondering if they only have the same rights as those held on Christmas Island because of where they landed, why do we need offshore processing at all? Most of those in Christmas Island were found in the excise zone. Why not bring them all to the mainland?
Well, we do have a separate regime, and that's something that's been bipartisan for some time. It does lead to a different process. It means that the Refugee Review Tribunal doesn't come into play. We have a more flexible and informal review process. We also have what's called a 46. I don't want to get technical, but
sure. But the point is, we have this regime.
Process.
But you're saying these people are being brought straight to the mainland will still be processed under the offshore processing regime. Well, if that's true, why do we need to hold people on Christmas Island at all?
Well, because there's a detention centre at Christmas Island, Fran. It was built by the previous government at considerable expense, and it should be used for that purpose.
It's overcrowded. Why not bring a whole lot of those people here?
Well, that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing, Fran. That's exactly what we've been doing. It's what I've been working towards for several months, and that's exactly what we're doing. Yeah, in that we're reducing the numbers on Christmas Island.
Why has the government insisted on loading 3,000 people at one point on Christmas Island if it was not about trying to maintain the integrity of the offshore processing regime?
Well, Fran, that's never been the case because clearly when people are processed originally at Christmas Island or Ashmore Reef, they are offshore entry people, and the law is very clear. If they then get transferred to the mainland, it has no impact on the way they are processed. So the suggestion that somehow we would artificially keep numbers high at Christmas Island for some sort of legal outcome is frankly, with respect, not right. As I said, when I became the minister, I took the view that we needed to reduce the numbers on Christmas Island. We've opened new detention centres, or planning to open some and planning to open others to relieve that pressure on Christmas Island, but it does take time to get them up and running.
And just finally, Minister, the Bali Summit next week, the government pushing the case for a regional solution at the Bali Summit. If you can't get agreement on a regional processing centre, and reports suggest that you're not going to, will you still keep trying, or is it time to look for other solutions?
Well, Fran, we need an international solution, and nobody should underestimate my or the government's determination to get one. Now, the Bali process is important, and I hope that the Bali meeting next week endorses a regional approach to these issues, and I hope that it endorses options for governments to work together on very closely in terms of a regional solution. It won't, of course, be the final sign-off on all the answers, but I am very hopeful that it will endorse governments working together on a regional basis to break the people smugglers' business model. There's an alternative here. You can go down the opposition's path of making our regime harsher and more punitive and having effectively another Christmas Island on Nauru with temporary protection visas, or you can say we'll work with international partners to break the people smugglers' business model. It takes longer to do that, but as I say, nobody should underestimate my or the government's determination to do that.
Chris Bowen, thanks very much for joining us on Breakfast.
Nice talking to you, Fran.
Federal Immigration Minister Chris Bowen in our Parliament House studio. It's 9 minutes to 8.